That's all right. Do you have everyone? They said Gonzalez might be late, he's doing something, so I'm going to talk. She's not here, then I'll go to Jimenez. Okay. Everybody prepared? Y'all got what? You okay? Hey, didn't know I knew that, did you? Well, independence from Spain over a century ago in 1902. This should be a happy occasion. A somber reminder that Cuba is not a free country. Its people suffer from the ruthless communist regime. This anniversary Cuba. When the new socialist Democrats say that socialism is the answer, today reminds us that socialism is compatible with the true meaning of freedom. Freedom means protecting ourselves, our families, and our communities, not subjecting them to the state. Freedom means practicing free speech and self-determination, not suppressing them with violence. And freedom certainly means pursuing happiness, not stifling it. Americans are blessed to enjoy these freedoms in our nations, but sadly, Cubans cannot in theirs. That's because socialism never practiced what it preaches. That is why I'm alarmed when Democrats use socialist rhetoric and push socialist policies. Democrats want to control what we read, what we teach our children, and deny our history. Democrats want to censure free speech and restrict debate through political correctness. And Democrats want to redistribute taxpayers' hard-earned money from those who work to those who choose not to. That, my friends, is the road to serfdom. The fact is, socialism policies have never worked, and they do not work. They will never work as long as we have those who are willing to defend her. And the Republican Party always will. America will never be a socialist country. I stand before you proud to take part in recognizing Cuban Independence Day and in solidarity for a free and democratic Cuba. I feel especially honored to be joined by those members of Congress to celebrate freedom and denounce socialism. They and their families directly understand the meaning behind President Reagan's famous words, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." They and their families know the struggle because they are all Cuban Americans, who in one way or another have borne witness to the brutality of communism. And now I invite them to share their thoughts on this day, starting with my friend, Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida. Thank you, Leader. Thank you. Good morning, folks. Let me thank the Leader for bringing us together here. As he said, while that fight for independence, which lasted 100 years, culminated in independence for Cuba, today, freedom is elusive in that island just 90 miles away from the United States. Today, a communist socialist dictatorship represses, murders the Cuban people. And today, that same dictatorship is a threat, obviously, not only to the Cuban people, to the hemisphere, but to the national security interests of the United States, which is why it is crucial that the United States continues its solidarity with the Cuban people. The answer? Come speak to our constituents who have seen it happen before. This country will never become a socialist country as long as we continue to understand the evils of communism, the evils of socialism, and examples abound just in our own hemisphere. Muy rápidamente en español. Sí, la independencia de Cuba. Cuba llegó a tener su independencia y ahora, desafortunadamente, por más de 6 décadas, está nuevamente esclavizada por un régimen asesino, totalitario, corrupto. Y ahora no es el momento de alinearse al régimen, eliminando o tratando de debilitando las sanciones. Es el momento de mantenerse firme con el pueblo cubano, no con el régimen que los reprime. Ese régimen comunista socialista que muchos aquí en el Congreso dicen que es la panacea y que quieren tratar de traer el socialismo a los Estados Unidos. Solamente les decimos unas cosas: que hablen con las víctimas del socialismo en nuestra comunidad, que hablen con los que perdieron todo y que escucharon la misma retórica de que todo iba a ser gratis y que las armas no eran necesarias para las personas decentes y que los libros se podían censurar. Eso lo hemos visto en lugares como Cuba, Nicaragua y Venezuela. No podemos permitir que suceda en este país, los Estados Unidos de América. Ahora con ustedes, let me now introduce a dear friend who has a family who is very well known, obviously, particular in South Florida, and that is obviously Congressman Alex Mooney, whose mother, by the way, served time in Castro's gulags. Alex.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mario. My mother fled communist Cuba when she was 20 years old. She was born and raised there, spent 7 weeks in a communist prison before being fortunate to come to this country. Her name is Eulalia Suarez Gaston. She goes by Lala now. Recently wrote a book about her journey to freedom here in America, one of 14 children. Very proud of our Cuban heritage, obviously being raised by a mother who lost her country. Actually, on page 1 of her book, she says, on April 17, 1961, during the Bay of Pigs invasion, it became more dangerous now as Fidel Castro used everything possible to stay in power. The danger was very real for my entire family and for anyone else who had spoken out against Fidel Castro's revolution. You see, in Cuba, they don't have freedom of the press like we are enjoying right here today. They don't have that. You speak out against your government, they lock you up. That's it. So being raised with a mother, my father fought in Vietnam. He was an army captain to fight against the advance of communism. I was raised to stand up and fight back against the evils of communism, to fight for freedom, and I'm going to continue that here in this country. So I'm just going to, we got a lot of speakers. I'm going to move on to our next speaker. It's my pleasure to introduce someone who's, like me, mother came from Cuba as well, Congresswoman Nicole Meliotakis of New York.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much for coming here today, and thank you to the leader for acknowledging this day, because we once again want to see a free Cuba. Viva Cuba Libre is something that we say and we pray for. I am the daughter of a Cuban refugee. My mom came in 1959 when Fidel Castro took power. Unfortunately, like many families, my family was split apart. My mother came with her sister, with my grandmother, and they came to the United States for freedom. My grandfather chose to stay behind because he was a small business owner. He had 2 gas stations in a home, which the regime eventually took. And I'm here today to warn the American people about what could potentially happen should we not fight to preserve these freedoms, these liberties, and the American dream for future generation. Some of the stuff I hear being proposed from my colleagues on the other side is quite scary. You know, and one of the scariest things that I heard was packing the court. That was from my neighbor, Nadler in Brooklyn. And why is it scary? Well, if you know your history and you look at what happened to Venezuela, that is exactly how Hugo Chavez destroyed Venezuela. Packed the court from 20 to 32 justices, passed 45,000 consecutive cases ruled in he and Maduro's favor. And that is how they destroyed the wealthiest nation in South America. Socialism is nothing but communism light. That's what it is. And when you run out of other people's money, that's when you use the force, the abuse, the arrest, the murders to keep power. And it's something that we need to be mindful of, because we must always, as Americans, be on the side of freedom, of liberty, of opportunity, and what so many people like my parents came to this country to pursue. There's a reason why everyone wants to come to the United States. There's a reason why you see the crisis at the southern border today. And people who are American born should take the opportunity to talk to those individuals who fled their homelands, to find out why they fled their homelands. And my colleagues who are proposing policies, the very policies that these immigrants fled their home country to escape, should actually have a conversation with those individuals to find out why their policies are broken and would destroy this country. Thank you very much, and I'm so honored to introduce my good friend who was born in Cuba and came here as just a 6-year-old boy, Carlos Jimenez.
Thank you, Nicole. And I was actually born in Cuba. I'm actually an immigrant. My family fled communism back in 1960. And I can tell you that the things that happened when Castro took power, number one, you lost your freedom to bear arms. Number two, you lost your freedom of the press. You lost your freedom of expression. And you also were indoctrinated. And so one of the things that I asked my father, some years after I came here was, Dad, how come, what made you decide to come to the United States? And he said, son, you came home one day and it was clear to me that you're being indoctrinated. And for me, it was much more important that you live in a land of freedom and opportunity than to keep our lifestyle. And by the way, we were upper middle class. When my father came here, and my mother came here to the United States back in November of 1960, they came here with $10 in their pocket and a watch, and that was it. And they started anew. And so it wasn't about an economic flight, it was about a flight of policy, politics, communism, socialism, the pure rejection of communism and socialism. I want to thank the leader for recruiting me to come to Congress. And the reason I came to Congress is to fight the ideology that's being pitched here by the other side. I'm here to fight the squad and what they think is their theory of how things could be better in the United States. Well, I live that theory, okay? And that theory doesn't work. It hasn't worked in Cuba. It didn't work in the Soviet Union. It's certainly not working in Venezuela. It's never worked anywhere, and yet they're pitching it to us. And so remember the things I told you. Freedom of the press. Yes, you still have freedom of the press. Freedom of expressions. You see more and more censorship happening right now. They're trying to take away our gun rights. And so be careful about the things that are being espoused by the other side. We see it very clearly on this side because we lived it. And so we know what the next step is. And don't believe that it can't happen here. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that what happened to me in 1960 doesn't happen to my children or my grandchildren in the future, where they're going to have to leave this country for somewhere else to find freedom. And that's what we're here to do, fight for freedom. And again, thank you, leader, for showing your commitment to liberty and for a free Cuba. Yes, we're commemorating 119 years of Cuba's liberty, but Cuba isn't free. And just ask, the millions of people that live there today, and you can't ask, but there are tens of thousands of people that have died trying to leave it. Now, what country forces their people to stay and doesn't give them the right to leave? Well, I can tell you one country, Cuba, all right, where again, tens of thousands of people have lost their lives in the Straits of Florida trying to leave that country. If it were up to Ocasio-Cortez and her group, the squad, that's paradise. Cuba is paradise. It's no paradise. It's equality. Everybody's equal for sure. They're equally miserable in Cuba. And so if you want misery, go ahead and follow what they want to give us. And so, again, I want to thank you, leader. I want to thank all my colleagues that are here. I'm going to say a couple of words in Spanish. Hoy hace 119 años Cuba logró su primera independencia. La lucha para la libertad todavía sigue en esa tierra que fue una vez una patria con promesa. También hoy conmemoramos todos los patriotas valientes que han luchado por la libertad del pueblo cubano. Muchos han dado sus vidas por librar a Cuba del régimen brutal, diabólico y comunista de Castro. Espero que en mi vida alcanzaré a ver una Cuba libre y democrática, la bella tierra que dejé en 1960. Muchas gracias. Thank you. God bless you all. Now I'll introduce my colleague from Florida 27, Representative Maria Salazar.
Thank you very much. I was a member of the press for 35 years, so I know exactly what you guys were thinking. Why do these people talk so much? It's hot. I'm gonna cut. I'm just gonna do a 230 and a little package, and probably we are just going to not use most of this material. But I'm Maria Salazar, district number 27. I represent the heart of the Cuban exile community in the United States. And I understand that many in the press and the mainstream media believes that these Cubans are a bunch of crazies and they exaggerate when they're talking about socialism. Cuba and Venezuela, that's not going to happen here. Oh, no, because we have institutions and those institutions are strong. And this democratic socialism in reality is just trying to do better and to find equality and all those pretty words that we hear. And reality is that it's a fallacy. Socialism is socialism is socialism. You have two models, capitalism or you have socialism, or you have free market economy, which is what we want, egalitarian free market economy, or we have socialism. Be very careful. And we know it. And as my colleagues, and I thank once again the leader for acknowledging today at a very important day for my community that it hasn't come yet, which is a free Cuba. I do want to forewarn all of you and be very careful that what's really happening in this country is very troubling for all of us. We're sending the message that we need to keep the American agenda the way it is. It has worked for 300 years. And when they tell you that, and as Carlos Jimenez was saying, when they're saying that we have not tried socialism the right way, that is a fallacy. Venezuela, in only 20 years, lost all its freedoms, and the average Venezuelan weighs 15 pounds less today than 20 years ago because of democratic socialism. I would like to say a few words now in Spanish. Hoy es el día de la independencia de Cuba, pero en realidad no es un día libre. Es un día triste porque lo que tenemos que estar es en realidad celebrando una libertad que no ha llegado. A mis hermanos cubanos les decimos que estamos con ellos, y a los hermanos latinoamericanos y los americanos que están aquí, mucho cuidado, que la palabra socialismo no trae nada bueno. Lo único que trae es miseria, opresión y exilio. Muchas gracias a todos. Thank you very much. And if you want to take independent bites, I'm sure that we'll hear. And once again, thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Leader.
No, you're right. You're right. Thank you all very much. We understand many people, when they sit back and think about what happened in Cuba and Venezuela, they think it could never happen here. But when you listen to the debate in the House on this new majority of the Socialist Democrats, you begin to wonder. And that's why it's so important with those behind me, not only for themselves personally, but their own family have witnessed what has gone on. We can never allow that to happen into America. Questions, comments?
Mr. Leader.
Yeah, let's start. Let's guess. What do we have about Cuba?
Would you be willing
Freedom.
to testify about your conversation with Donald Trump on January 6th? If you were asked by an outside...
Sure. Next question.
Were you surprised to see 35 Republicans vote for commission?
No, not at all. I thought it would probably be higher, but this Pelosi commission that we tried to work on for quite some time. Remember, I asked Pelosi for one on January 13th. She spent 4 months just playing politics with it. In that time period, an officer got killed on Good Friday just across with this Capitol. She didn't want to have the scope to do that as well. I just felt we're going to have 4 things happening right now. You've got 2 committees in the Senate already doing their investigation. I believe in 2 weeks they'll already have their report back, even though Pelosi wasted all this time. You got the architect of the Capitol given $10 million to study what we need done here to protect it. And then you got the Justice Department, rightfully does a much better job than we could ever do. Arrested already 445 people. Probably another 100 coming. That's the type of work we want to make sure done, that it never happens again, that those who participated and caused it should be held accountable, and that we secure this Capitol and we don't play politics with it. I just think a Pelosi commission is a lot of politics.
Leader McCarthy.
Yes.
What in the language of the bill limits the scope of the commission? It says it can look at any...
No, it doesn't say any.
It does.
No, it doesn't. No.
It's relevant. That would be an influencing factor.
I have a difference of opinion here than our legal counsel does too. So I gave language to Speaker Pelosi. I sent her 2 different letters. She never would communicate at all in that process. I think the scope needs to be expanded. If you look at the 9/11 Commission, we looked at what happened on 9/11 and what the buildup for that was. And I think that would be important here as well. Yes.
Do you think it's a conflict of interest for members to be voting on a commission that they might have to potentially be witnesses for and provide information on?
No, because who knows what they're going to do on the commission. So, no, I don't think so.
Absolutely certain that none of your members were in any communication with any of the people who
I don't believe any are, but thank you for the question. Everybody have a nice day.
McCarthy, can I ask about the mask resolution from yesterday?
Yeah.
So yesterday, the resolution that you brought to the floor about masks was tabled. Is there anything else that your conference can do or plans to do to change the mask requirements currently on the floor?
Well, we would just like to abide by the science. What's interesting is you look at this building, there's a chamber for the House and a chamber for the Senate. But apparently, COVID works differently in both chambers. Because in the Senate, you don't wear a mask. In the House, you have to wear a mask. The only difference is the Speaker. She doesn't want to abide by the CDC rules. She actually wants to have greater control. That, to me, is a real frustration on all that we have happen. How can the Senate not wear a mask and the House in the same building? To me, it's all about it. That's not true.
Are you encouraging the rest of your
You said
conference to get vaccinated?
75%. You said half. Half your conference is 25%.